It was an ordinary morning in the city. The streets were alive with the rhythm of life, people rushing past each other, each lost in their own world. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm golden light over the tall buildings. Turning their glass windows into mirrors of the morning, birds chirped faintly. But it was almost drowned out by the hum of traffic. She stepped out of her small apartment, clutching a worn leather bag close to her side. Her shoes tapped softly against the pavement as she made her way down the quiet side street that led to the cafe she loved. It was a small place tucked between a bookstore and a florist, almost hidden from the main road. The kind of place that smelled of fresh coffee and old books. She liked it because it felt like a secret world, away from the chaos outside. As she entered, the familiar scent of coffee and baked bread greeted her. The morning crowd was thin, mostly people sitting with their laptops or quietly chatting with a friend. She ordered her usual cappuccino with just the right amount of foam and found a table by the window. The light fell softly on her, and for a moment, she felt like nothing else mattered but the quiet happiness of this small routine. He was there too, though she didn't notice him at first. He sat at a corner table, hunched over a notebook, scribbling quickly. There was a look on his face that spoke of concentration and worry all at once, as if he was trying to solve something impossible. His jacket was slightly wrinkled, and his hair fell into his eyes. It was clear that he didn't notice the world around him. As she carried her cup to her table, her elbow accidentally nudged her bag, sending it tipping slightly. The movement startled her, and her hand jerked. The cup in her hand wobbled, and before she could stop it, coffee spilled onto the edge of his table. She gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, rushing over with napkins. "I didn't mean." He looked up, and for a moment she thought he would be angry. His eyes, however, softened almost immediately. "It's okay," he said with a calm smile, gesturing for her not to worry. "Really, it's fine." She bent down quickly, blotting at the notebook, trying not to ruin anything. "I hope nothing important is," he laughed softly, sound that was warm and quiet, the kind that made her feel immediately at ease. "It's just notes." "No big deal." She straightened up, feeling her cheeks warm. "I'm really sorry. I wasn't paying attention." He shook his head. "No harm done. Honestly, it's nice to meet someone so apologetic first thing in the morning." Her eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them. A spark, fleeting yet unmistakable, that neither of them could explain. For a moment, the cafe seemed to grow quieter, as if the world had slowed down just enough for them to notice each other. "I'm glad you're not mad," she said, smiling nervously. He smiled back. "I rarely get mad." "Life's too short for that, don't you think?" She laughed lightly. "I suppose you're right. I didn't want to ruin your morning." "You didn't," he said, his eyes thoughtful. "Actually, you made it more interesting." They both chuckled, and the ice seemed to break. She noticed the way he looked at her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but with curiosity. Like he genuinely wanted to know more about her. She felt a flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest, a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I'm glad I met you," she said softly. He nodded as if he felt the same. "Me too." They talked a little more about small things at first. The cafe, the weather, the city. Every word felt easy, natural, as though they had known each other longer than just a few minutes. She found herself laughing more than she had in days, enjoying the simplicity of the conversation. He listened with interest, and his attention made her feel seen in a way she wasn't used to. Time passed quickly. Before they realized it, the cafe had started to fill up. People came and went, and the barista called out orders. But for them, it was like a small bubble, pause from the world outside. "I should get going," she said eventually, glancing at her watch. She had work to do, errands to run, a life to continue. Yet she didn't want to leave this moment, this strange, wonderful feeling of connection. He nodded, a hint of reluctance in his eyes. "Yeah, I understand. But maybe I'll see you around again?" She smiled. "I hope so." There was a silence, comfortable and full of meaning. Neither knew what would happen next, but both felt a quiet certainty that this encounter was special. Rare. She left the cafe, the morning sun now higher in the sky. casting a brighter light on the busy streets. She walked slowly, letting her thoughts linger on the brief, magical moment she had just experienced. There was something about him she couldn't stop thinking about: the calm in his eyes, the warmth of his smile, the way he made her feel like she mattered in that small cafe. In that fleeting moment, he stayed behind for a few more minutes, finishing a page in his notebook before closing it carefully. He looked out the window, watching her leave. He felt a tug in his chest, a pull that told him this was the start of something he couldn't quite name yet. For a long time he just stood there, letting the noise of the cafe fade around him, lost in thought. Days passed after that morning. She returned to the cafe again and again, sometimes hoping, sometimes just out of habit, to see him. And often, as if by chance, he was there. Sometimes he was writing, sometimes reading, sometimes just staring out the window. And each time, their conversations grew a little longer. Their laughter a little freer, their connection a little deeper. Friends noticed the change in her. She seemed lighter, happier, more alive. She didn't talk much about him, but there was a glow in her that wasn't there before. And he, too, felt it. The city no longer seemed just a place to pass through. It became a place of possibilities, of moments that could feel magical if you just paid attention. One afternoon, it rained unexpectedly. She ran to the cafe, hoping to escape the downpour, and he was there, sitting with a cup of tea. She laughed at the coincidence, drenched but smiling. He smiled back, offering her a towel from his bag. That day, they talked about their dreams, their fears, the little things that mattered in life. They shared stories that made them both laugh, and others that made their hearts ache a little. And yet, the more they shared, the more they realized how much they wanted to keep discovering about each other. Something unspoken was growing between them. Delicate yet undeniable. Neither rushed it, neither tried to force it, but both felt it in the quiet moments, the brush of hands when passing sugar, the way their eyes met over the rim of a cup, the comfortable silences that spoke louder than words. It wasn't long before they started noticing small, magical coincidences. A book she had been wanting to read appeared on the shelf near his table. A song she loved played softly on the cafe speakers as he handed her a napkin. Moments like these felt like little signs, little nudges from the universe, telling them that their connection was not an accident. By the end of the week, both had started looking forward to their mornings more than anything. Not because of the coffee or the cafe, but because of each other. Life was ordinary, yet those moments made it extraordinary. They were ordinary people in a busy city, but when they were together, the world seemed to hold its breath, giving them a chance to notice something rare, something beautiful. And so, what began as a spilled cup of coffee slowly unfolded into the start of a story neither of them could have imagined. It was a story that would grow with laughter, tears, distance, and reunions. A story that felt magical because it was real. They didn't know what the future held, but in those quiet, golden mornings, they felt the undeniable pull of something special, something worth holding on to. The city moved on around them, but in that small cafe, in those fleeting mornings, a love quietly began, a love that promised warmth, hope, and a touch of magic in a world that often felt too hurried to notice such things. After that first morning, their lives seemed to revolve in small ways around the hope of seeing each other again. It was an obsession, but a quiet anticipation that made even ordinary days feel special. She found herself looking forward to the cafe visits, wondering if he would be there, hoping to catch a glimpse of his smile even if they didn't speak much. And he, too, felt a tug in his heart whenever the thought of her crossed his mind. A warmth that lingered long after she left. One afternoon, as she walked down the street toward the cafe, a sudden gust of wind threatened to ruin her carefully held papers. She laughed to herself, struggling to keep them from flying. And just as she rounded the corner, she saw him sitting at a familiar corner table, his notebook open, a pen in hand. Their eyes met, and she felt that same spark from before, a little stronger now, more insistent. He waved, and her heart fluttered. She approached him cautiously, her smile shy but genuine. "Hi," she said, setting her papers down on the table beside him. "Hey," he replied, his tone light but warm. "You made it." "I wouldn't miss it," she said softly. They talked at first about the mundane coffee, weather, the small happenings of the day, but the conversation quickly grew deeper, as though the ordinary topics were just a prelude to something more meaningful. She told him about the small joys she found in her work, the moments that made her feel alive. He listened, genuinely interested, asking questions that made her think about things she hadn't considered before. He shared pieces of his life too, the quiet struggles he faced, the moments of doubt and hope. There was no pretense, no need to impress, just two people sharing their truths. And in that sharing, something began to grow in understanding, a trust, and a connection that neither of them could ignore. Days turned into weeks. They began to see each other more often, not by planning, but by chance, or so it seemed. Sometimes it was at the cafe, sometimes in the park, sometimes in the small bookstore she frequented. Each encounter was a little world of its own, a pause from the noise of the city. One evening, they happened to meet at the park just as the sun was setting. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, reflecting on the small pond at the center of the park. Children ran and laughed nearby, and the air smelled faintly of grass and earth. He was sitting on a bench, sketching quietly, lost in thought. She approached slowly, not wanting to startle him, and he looked up, eyes lighting with recognition and delight. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, closing his sketchpad. "I didn't expect to be here either," she replied with a smile. They walked together slowly along the path, talking about their days, their dreams, and the small moments that mattered most. She found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, her fears, her hopes, the little quirks of her personality that usually went unnoticed. He listened with patience and care, offering gentle insights and quiet encouragement. At one point, he stopped and pointed toward the pond where a family of ducks floated gracefully. "Do you ever think about how little things can be so magical?" he asked. She tilted her head, thinking. "Yes," she said softly. "Sometimes the smallest moments feel the most important, like this. Walking here with you, noticing everything around us. Simple, but it feels like it matters." He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "Exactly. It's strange, isn't it? How life can feel ordinary, and then a small moment makes it extraordinary." She nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that she had begun to look at the world differently, noticing the little things, the beauty in the quiet moments. And he too seemed to see the world with a similar wonder, noticing details she had never thought about before. Their bond grew stronger with each encounter. They laughed together more easily, shared thoughts more openly, and found comfort in each other's presence. Friends and acquaintances began to notice the change in them, the way they smiled at each other, the way their eyes met across a room, the subtle gestures that spoke louder than words. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, gentle, and undeniable. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves seeking shelter under the same small awning outside a bookstore. The rain poured around them, drumming against the roof and soaking the streets. She shivered slightly, and he quickly offered his jacket. She hesitated, then accepted it, and for a moment they stood close together, watching the rain fall. "Funny how the rain can bring people together," he said with a chuckle, though his eyes held something softer, more meaningful. She smiled, feeling the warmth of the jacket and the presence of someone who cared. "Yes, it's nice," she replied. They stayed there for a while, talking and laughing as the rain continued. It was a simple moment, but it felt magical, a memory they would both carry with them. Over time, their connection began to shape the way they lived. She found herself looking forward to his messages, even if they were just small notes, simple greetings, or a funny observation. And he found joy in the little ways she reached out, and the way her words could brighten a dull day. One day, as they walked through the park, he suddenly stopped and looked at her seriously. "Do you ever feel like some people come into your life at just the right time?" he asked. She looked at him, her heart catching slightly. "I think so," she said quietly. "I feel that way right now." He smiled, relief and happiness evident in his expression. "I'm glad you feel that," he said softly, "'cause I feel the same. Meeting you, it's changed the way I see things. It's like life is brighter." She felt a rush of emotion she could barely put into words. "It's changed me too," she admitted. "I never thought small moments could feel this big. But with you, they do." The days continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their friendship and growing connection. They shared meals, walks, quiet afternoons in the cafe, and spontaneous adventures around the city. Sometimes they simply sat together in silence, comfortable in the presence of someone who understood them without needing explanations. It wasn't just the big gestures that mattered, it was the small things. A shared glance across the table, a gentle touch on the arm, the way he would remember her favorite pastry, the way she noticed the way his eyes lit up when he talked about something he loved. These small moments built a foundation stronger than either of them realized, creating a bond that felt both real and magical. One evening, as the city lights flickered on and the sky turned deep blue, they found themselves on a quiet street, walking side by side. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of fresh rain and city life. He paused, turning to her with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. "I'm glad we met," he said simply. She smiled back, feeling the truth in his words. "Me too," she replied. It was a simple statement, yet it carried all the weight of the moments they had shared. The laughter, the quiet conversations, the small magical coincidences that seemed to surround them. It was a statement that spoke of beginnings, of something real and enduring, of a connection that neither time nor distance could easily break. That night, as she walked home, she thought about the strange, wonderful way life worked. How a spilled cup of coffee could lead to something so meaningful, so rare. She thought about the warmth in his eyes, the gentle way he listened, the way he made her feel seen. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The city around her buzzed with life, but she felt a calm in her chest. A quiet certainty that the path ahead was bright, that the moments they shared were just the start of something extraordinary. And somewhere he too looked out over the city, thinking of her with a soft smile, feeling the same warmth, the same hope, and the same quiet magic that seemed to follow them. Wherever they went, the weeks that followed continued to strengthen their connection. They laughed, they shared, they discovered. And in that discovery, something more than friendship began to bloom or gentle. Heartwarming affection that promised that no matter what challenges lay ahead, their bond was something worth cherishing, something rare, and something magical. Every day brought new surprises, small gestures, and quiet moments that left them both smiling long after they were alone. Life felt fuller, richer, and more beautiful, simply because they had found each other. And though neither could have predicted the path ahead, both felt ready, knowing that together they could face anything. Life, as it often does, began to pull them in different directions. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. There was no argument, no falling out. It was the gentle tug of responsibilities, the way the world often forces people apart even when they wish to stay close. He had received an opportunity to work in a city some distance away, a project that would take months of his attention and presence. It was something he had worked toward for years, and it couldn't be postponed. She understood, of course, but the thought of not seeing him every day left a hollow ache in her chest. The morning before he was to leave, they met at their usual cafe. The air was heavy with unspoken words, with the knowledge that the coming days would be harder than any they had faced so far. She arrived first, her hands clutching her bag, her heart racing in anticipation and worry. He came in shortly after, carrying a small suitcase and a backpack. He smiled at her, but the usual ease was missing, replaced by a quiet tension, a seriousness she hadn't seen before. "I can't believe this is happening already," she said softly. Taking the seat across from him, he sighed, looking down at his coffee before meeting her eyes. "I know, I wish it were different," she nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand, but I don't want to think about the distance. I just want to focus on today." He reached across the table, gently brushing her hand with his. The touch was both comforting and heartbreaking at the same time. "Me too," he said, his voice low. "Today matters more than anything else." For a while they sat in silence, savoring the moments they had left before the world pulled them apart. They talked about memories, small adventures, and the little things that made their connection so special. Laughter mixed with quiet sighs, and sometimes tears threatened to fall, but they held them back. Wanting to make the day last as long as possible, when it was time to leave, they walked together to the train station. The city seemed unusually quiet, almost as if it, too, understood the significance of the moment. The train arrived, its whistle echoing through the station, and he turned to her one last time. "All right," he promised, squeezing her hand gently. "I'll wait," she replied. Forcing a smile, though her heart felt heavy, the train pulled away, and she watched until it disappeared from view. The world felt emptier, quieter, and she realized how much his presence had filled her days. She walked home slowly, carrying both the memory of him and the ache of absence. The first few days without him were strange and difficult. She missed the small things, the way he laughed at her jokes, the way he noticed her mood without her saying a word, the way their conversations flowed effortlessly. Every time her phone buzzed with a message, her heart leaped, hoping it was him. And often it was. Short messages, small notes of encouragement, little reminders that he was thinking of her. Each one was a lifeline, but it wasn't the same as seeing him in person. He, too, struggled with the distance. Work was demanding, the city unfamiliar, and yet every spare moment he had, he thought of her. He remembered the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, the sound of her voice in quiet moments, the gentle warmth she brought to ordinary days. He sent her messages whenever he could, sometimes long letters late at night, describing his days and sharing thoughts he wanted her to know. Despite the physical distance, their connection did not weaken. It took on a different form, less spontaneous, more deliberate, but still meaningful. They learned to treasure every call, every text, every chance to hear each other's voice. It wasn't easy. Miscommunications crept in, small frustrations and misunderstandings. Moments when the distance made everything feel more complicated than it should. But they always came back to each other, apologizing, explaining, laughing at the little confusions that life seemed to throw their way. Weeks turned into months. There were moments of doubt, moments when the longing felt unbearable. She would walk past the cafe, hoping against hope that he might somehow be there, even though she knew he was far away. He would pause at his new office window, imagining her walking along the familiar streets of their city, wishing he could see her smile in person. And yet, through it all, the small, magical moments persisted. Sometimes a song on the radio would remind her of him, and she would laugh softly, sending him a message about it. Sometimes he would find a place that reminded him of a shared memory and take a photo, sending it to her with a note that said, "Thinking of this moment with you." Those little gestures kept the magic alive, a quiet thread connecting them despite the miles. One evening, as she sat by her window, the city lights twinkling below, she thought about how strange and wonderful life could be, how a chance encounter months ago had led to this complicated, beautiful, and deeply felt connection. She realized that love wasn't always about constant presence. Sometimes it was about trust, patience, and the belief that someone mattered enough to endure distance and challenges. He, meanwhile, found himself planning little surprises. He mailed her small notes, left little packages at her door through mutual friends, always careful to bring a smile to her face. Each gesture, simple as it was, reminded her that she was not alone, that he was thinking of her even when he couldn't be there. Despite the separation, their bond continued to grow. Conversations deepened, feelings strengthened, and the longing for reunion became a quiet, steady pulse in both their lives. They talked about the future, about the moments they would share when the distance no longer existed. Those conversations were full of hope, careful dreams, and the magic of imagining a life together. And then one evening, a sudden surprise broke the monotony of distance. She received a message from him, telling her he would be back in the city for a short visit. Her heart raced with excitement and nervous anticipation. She didn't know how it would feel to see him again after months apart, but she knew she had to be ready. When the day finally arrived, She went to the cafe early, her hands trembling slightly as she sipped her coffee. She watched the door, heart pounding, every passing stranger making her heart leap and fall in hope. And then she saw him. He looked around, searching, and when their eyes met, a smile broke across both their faces, a smile that spoke of longing, relief, and a quiet joy that words could not capture. They ran to each other without a word. The months of distance melting away in an instant. The city faded around them, leaving only the two of them, laughter and tears mingling, hearts racing, hands tightly clasped. It was a reunion filled with relief, happiness, and the deep understanding that their bond had survived the test of time and distance. They spent the day together, walking through the familiar streets, revisiting old places, and creating new memories. Every shared smile, every gentle touch, every quiet conversation felt amplified, filled with the magic of reunion. She realized that absence had made her appreciate him even more, made her notice the little things she had always loved, the way he listened, the way he laughed, the small gestures that spoke volumes. He, too, felt the power of their connection more strongly than ever. The distance had been hard, yes, but it had also shown him how deeply he cared, how much her presence mattered, and how much he wanted to be a part of her life, always. As night fell, they found themselves sitting quietly in a park, the city lights twinkling around them. The air was cool, filled with the scent of rain from earlier in the day. They held hands, neither needing to speak. The silence was comfortable, filled with understanding and unspoken promises. "I miss this," he said finally, his voice soft. "Me too," she replied, leaning slightly against him. It was a simple exchange, yet it carried all the weight of the months they had endured apart. It spoke of patience, endurance, hope, and love the quiet. The steady kind of love that grows even when life becomes complicated. That night as they parted, there was no sadness, no fear, only the knowledge that the distance had made their connection stronger, more resilient, and even more magical. They knew challenges would come again, that life would continue to test them in ways they could not predict. But they also knew that what they shared was rare, precious, and worth every effort. Every moment of longing, every mile between them. And so, even as life pulled them in different directions once more, their hearts remained intertwined. Each day apart was a reminder of the value of their connection. Each message a testament to the care and thoughtfulness that defined their bond. The city around them moved on, people rushing past, oblivious to the quiet story unfolding between two ordinary people discovering something extraordinary through distance, uncertainty, and the challenges life presented. They learned that love was not just about being together. It was about seeing the magic in the small things, trusting in each other, and holding on to the belief that some connections were meant to endure, no matter what. And in that knowledge, a quiet hope began to grow, a hope that no matter how far life might separate them, their hearts would always find a way back to each other. The months of waiting and longing finally came to an end one crisp autumn morning. The city seemed different that day, the lights softer, the air filled with a subtle anticipation that mirrored what she felt in her chest. She had walked past the cafe that morning, as she always did, and had noticed him sitting there, notebook open, looking as absorbed and thoughtful as ever. But today, something felt different. There was a warmth in his expression, a light in his eyes that drew her in without words. When she approached, he looked up, and the smile that spread across his face made her heart skip a beat. It was as if no time had passed at all, yet the months of distance had made the moment sweeter, more powerful. He stood quickly, almost instinctively. She found herself stepping forward without thinking, as though gravity itself were guiding her toward him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other, taking in the familiar features, the little quirks, the presence they had both missed more than they could put into words. Then, slowly, almost reluctantly, they hugged. It was a hug that held all the months of separation, all the longing and missed moments, all the quiet nights spent thinking of each other. It was a hug that said everything without a single word. "I missed you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "I missed you too," he replied, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "More than I can say." They pulled back slightly, enough to look at each other, to really see each other again. His eyes searched hers, and she felt the depth of his feelings, the quiet but undeniable love that had endured the distance. She smiled, feeling the warmth of the connection that had never faltered. That had grown stronger even when miles had separated them. They decided to spend the day together. Walking through the streets of the city they both loved, every corner held a memory, every small shop a shared moment from the past. They revisited the bookstore where they had first laughed together, the small park where they had spent quiet afternoons, and even the quiet alley where they had first bumped into each other by chance. With each place, the city seemed to come alive, as if celebrating their reunion along with them. As they walked, they talked about the months apart. She told him about the small victories and the little struggles she had faced, the moments when she had missed him most, and the ways she had found to keep his presence alive in her life. He shared his own stories, the challenges of his work, the times he had longed to see her, the small gestures he had planned to remind her that he was thinking of her. "It feels like we've been living in two different worlds," she said softly. "But somehow, those worlds always found a way to connect." He nodded, taking her hand in his. "I think that's the magic of this. No matter the distance, no matter the obstacles, we found our way back to each other. That's something special. That's something real." As the afternoon lights softened, they found a quiet bench in the park and sat down. The leaves had begun to turn, painting the ground in shades of gold and red, and the air was crisp and fresh. They didn't speak for a while, simply enjoying the presence of one another. When they finally did, the conversation turned to their hopes for the future, the dreams they wanted to chase together, the small adventures they wanted to share, the life they hoped to build. She felt a sense of calm she had never known before. It wasn't just the joy of seeing him again. It was the certainty, the deep, unshakable knowing that they belonged in each other's lives. The months of waiting had taught them patience, endurance, and the value of connection. And now, finally, they could embrace it fully, without fear. Without distance to cloud the experience, as evening fell, the city lights began to twinkle. Reflecting off the wet streets from a light drizzle that had started unexpectedly, they walked slowly, hand in hand, the rain gentle and warm against their skin. They laughed as they dodged puddles, finding joy in the small, spontaneous moments that made life feel alive. Every glance, every touch, every word felt heightened by the months of longing, by the awareness that they had waited for this moment, and now it was real. At one point, they found themselves standing in the doorway of a small flower shop. He picked up a single bloom, a delicate flower with soft petals, and handed it to her. "For you?" he said simply. She took it, feeling the thoughtfulness and care behind the gesture. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Not as beautiful as you," he replied. And she laughed, feeling her heart swell. They left the shop and wandered to a quiet square, where the soft glow of streetlights created a magical atmosphere. He took her hand, guiding her to a small fountain, and they sat on the edge, watching the water sparkle in the night. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, connected in a way that was both simple and profound. "I feel like everything led to this moment," she said quietly, resting her head on his shoulder. "I feel the same," he replied, wrapping an arm around her. "All the waiting, all the distance, it was worth it to be here with you." They stayed there for a long time, talking about small things, about hopes and dreams, about the little magical moments they had shared before and after the separation. They laughed, they reminisced, they shared quiet silences that spoke more than words ever could. And through it all, the connection between them deepened, strengthened by the trials they had faced and the love that had endured. As the night grew colder, they walked back toward the cafe, the familiar lights guiding them like old friends. The city, alive with people and movement, seemed to pause for them, giving space for their hearts to reconnect fully. They sat at a corner table, sipping warm drinks, feeling the warmth spread through them, not just from the coffee, but from the joy of being together again. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his once more. "I don't want to imagine life without you," he said softly. "Neither do I," she replied, squeezing his hand. "I never want to let this go." It was a simple declaration, but it carried the weight of everything they had experienced the first meeting. The growing connection, the challenges of distance, and the joy of reunion. It was a promise, unspoken but understood, that they would face whatever came next together, that their bond was strong enough to endure anything. The days that followed were filled with the quiet magic of ordinary life made extraordinary by love. They shared meals, walks, and small adventures, finding joy in the simplest moments. A shared laugh over a funny incident, a gentle touch in a crowded street, a quiet conversation by the window of the cafe. They noticed and cherished everything, knowing that these were the moments that truly mattered. Friends noticed the change in them. There was a lightness, a joy that radiated from their presence together. People would comment on how happy they seemed, how natural their connection looked, how effortless it was to see the care they had for each other. But they didn't need the recognition. The magic existed between them, in the quiet gestures, the shared glances, the laughter and the tears that spoke of a love growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, as they walked through a small park filled with autumn leaves, he paused and looked at her with a seriousness that made her heart skip a beat. "I want to make every moment count," he said. "No more waiting, no more distance. I want us to be together, fully, in every way." She looked into his eyes, feeling the depth of his sincerity. "I want that too," she said softly. "I've waited, I've hoped, and now I'm ready." They embraced, the world around them fading as they held each other, feeling the quiet strength of a love that had been tested and had endured. It was a love built not on grand gestures, but on the small, meaningful moments, the shared laughter, the thoughtful notes, the quiet support through challenges, the understanding and care that had grown between them over time. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the city, they walked hand in hand, hearts light and full. The months of separation, the longing, and the challenges had only strengthened what they shared. And in that moment, they knew that their story was just beginning, that the magic they had found in each other was real, lasting, and worth cherishing forever. They paused on a quiet hill overlooking the city. Watching the lights twinkle like stars below, she leaned against him, feeling the warmth and certainty of his presence. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, and they stayed like that, in silence, letting the moment speak for itself. "I'm glad we found each other," he whispered. "So am I," she replied, and in that simple exchange they knew it was true. They had found something rare, something magical, something that made the ordinary world around them shine a little brighter. It was a love that had endured distance, grown through challenges, and blossomed in the quiet. Everyday moments of life, for the first time in a long time, they felt completely at peace together, unafraid, and ready to embrace whatever the future held.